welcome to the season 3 premiere episode of Crippled by Culture, where we talk about everything in life and relate it to the disabled and chronically ill community. My name is Sean Gold, and I am an author, advocate, and nonverbal public speaker for the disability community. To give a quick visual description for accessibility, I'm a Black man with a white tracheostomy breathing tube in my neck. I am currently wearing navy blue shirt. The person off camera who you are hearing is speaking for me. This video is recorded from a Zoom call with me and the person talking for me off camera, as well as my guest in the other box next to it. I'd like to thank Josh Rettig for being my voice transcriber in this episode. You're welcome. In this episode, we are talking about the intersections of disability, accessibility, and writing.
Before we get any further into the interview, I want to give a shout out to our partnering nonprofit festival for the series, Festability. As the media director, I help organize a wonderful event in St. Louis at the Missouri History Museum. We have so many activities and vendors set up all over with an amazing headliner for our main stage each year. It is the best event in St. Louis to celebrate your disability unapologetically while celebrating the Americans with Disabilities Act. Make sure you come out if you're nearby. Check out the link in the description to learn more. Thank you Festability for sponsoring the series. Now, back to the show.
Now let's get to today's amazing guest. Dr. Jasmine Simmons is a deafblind audiologist born with Usher syndrome, affecting her hearing, vision, and balance. She received cochlear implants at age 2 and now advocates for accessible healthcare and inclusion for individuals with sensory impairments. An author and public speaker, Dr. Simmons raises awareness about Usher syndrome and inspires others through her work and advocacy. Dr. Simmons, thanks for being here today. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. So I am a Black woman wearing glasses, and I have a black shirt on, and I have locks, and my pronouns is she, her. And I am doing wonderful today. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast, and I'm extremely excited to be here.
Thank you. We really appreciate having you. So the first question might seem a bit silly after the introduction, but we're sticking with a bit of a script here. Do you identify with having a disability or chronic illness? And if so, do you mind sharing what kind you have?
Absolutely. So I do have Usher syndrome, which affects your hearing, vision, and balance. I was born profoundly deaf, and at the age of 2, I received my cochlear implant, which is a device that helps me hear. And at the age of 7, I was diagnosed with a condition called retinitis pigmentosa. A eye condition is a progressive eye condition that causes peripheral vision loss, nighttime vision, or nighttime blindness, and blind spots. So that is what my disabilities are. Yeah, so that's what my disabilities are.
How do your disabilities affect your day-to-day life?
So when I was at 7, I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. I'm gonna just say RP. When I was diagnosed with RP, that didn't really impact my life at that time. But my hearing loss more so did. And that was something I grew up on, and so it never really impacted me as a person. I just was a normal child just doing different activities, and I never viewed myself as disabled until when I was 27 and diagnosed as legally blind. And that really changed my perspective, and it actually impacts me more as I'm not driving. So I have to rely on the city's transportation or other people to get me to and from work. And so that can be a challenge. And as I'm getting older, my vision is slowly shrinking. So, it really does impact me at nighttime when I'm trying to get to, just even if I go outside for a walk, I am very paranoid that I might trip over something or injure myself because I completely miss it. Because, like, I can't even see my hands as I'm talking to you. If I look straight ahead, I can't even see my hands. So my vision is just slowly shrinking. So it definitely impacts my day to day.
How old did you say you were when you were diagnosed?
With RP or Usher syndrome.
Uh, both, I guess.
I was diagnosed at 7 with RP and Usher syndrome. I At that time when I was 7, it was mentioned that my brother and I had Usher syndrome, but it wasn't genetically confirmed until our mid-20s.
Do you feel like there are other things that maybe haven't been diagnosed?
Um, that's a great question. Honestly, sometimes I believe that I have ADHD. And I've been wanting to get that diagnosed. Because I catch myself having conversations with somebody, and then next thing you know, my brain is on the next topic or focusing on something completely different from at task. And I'm like, whoa, Jasmine, focus at task. Like, what is in front of you? And I have a tendency to get distracted very easily. And so that's something I need to look into.
Do you think there are any what are some misconceptions about being a deaf and or blind person?
um, that blindness is completely dark and deafness, you hear completely nothing. It's a spectrum, with both. And that is something I had to understand myself. That, blindness is a spectrum, hearing loss is a spectrum. One person may hear or see something, and then another person may or may not. I do have an older brother. His name is Justin, and he also has Usher syndrome. So what he sees and what I see is very interesting. And his vision is worse than mine. He actually stopped driving at 25. I stopped driving at 27. So it's kind of interesting how our syndromes affects us very differently.
Did you have to go through your own internalized ableism, and how and if so, how has that journey been like towards acceptance?
Yeah, 110%. I mean, let's be honest, when we watch media and just we watch media, we see social media, and we see how it really shapes us, our perspective on disabled people. And so when I was young, my doctor had told me that I would never go blind in my lifetime. So I'm over here thinking like, yeah, okay, I'm not gonna go blind. And when I got my diagnosis as legally blind, that shocked me. I'm just like, but I can see. And even when I told other people that I was blind, they're like, but you can see. I'm like, I know. It was such a confusing concept that I was blind. I am blind. Um, but it was something that I had to work through, that, once, like I said earlier, that blindness is a spectrum. And vision loss, blindness can affect each person differently. And that was something that I had to work through. And also, as a deaf person, I never really had such a negative viewpoint on deaf people. I more so had a negative viewpoint on towards blind people that, that we weren't capable of doing things. And so when I was diagnosed myself, that was something I had to work through is, you know, we are capable blind. And, I hear more and more stories about blind people living on their own, doing X, Y, and Z, and not feeling dependent on others. And that's something I struggle with is being dependent. And, I'm so used to being independent, and I have to learn my new way of independence being a deafblind person.
You mentioned a minute ago having to stop driving. How hard was it to uh, give up on that, being able to drive?
Yeah. It it was extremely difficult and not difficult at the same time. Only because I knew that it was coming at some point. Um, right? I have progressive vision loss, so I knew it was coming. It was just a matter of when. And I wasn't expecting to give it up so early. But growing up, I would joke in a way of coping, oh, I would not be driving by the time I was 30. Like just a way of coping. And when it actually happened, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it actually happened. So it was a challenge. I think the hardest part was, you know, going to car mats and actually, handing over my keys. And a year prior, my cat actually had passed away. And I just remember being in the car mats parking lot, grieving the same way I felt when my cat passed away. And I just felt like it was so idiotic at the time. I was like, why am I feel this is such a materialistic object, and I'm over here. I just grieving is it. It was something. It was in common. I was grieving, and that's why it felt very similar because I was grieving of the loss of my independence of being able to just hop in the car and go somewhere. um and that is still an adjustment to this day. I still can go places, but it has to be planned out rather than spontaneous, and I'm very spontaneous. So it's something I'm continuously working through is learning how to be spontaneous in other ways.
That's good. Looking for ways to do that. We're going to move on to your involvement with the disabled community. What made you want to be an advocate for accessibility in the healthcare system?
Yeah, it honestly stems through my own personal experiences. Um, Luckily, my audiological care has been great. But others had not been so fortunate. But with when it comes to my eye care, um, it I had to definitely jump through barriers and hurdles just to get good care or a better understanding of my own health care. So that is what really inspired me to be an advocate for healthcare professionals, or I'm sorry, for other disabled people. And I really want to take the time to educate healthcare professionals on how to have more empathy and a better understanding how to address people in general, and disabled people especially, because it's likely that we have multiple healthcare providers and we're always battling one or the other. So it's just important for healthcare professionals to have a better understanding, to have empathy, so that way these people, including myself, can have good healthcare treatment.
Is there anything that you've learned from other disabled people?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Ever since I started my Instagram on social media, I've learned so much from other people, and just the stories I hear, inspirational stories, and honestly, I not heard the term inspiration porn until I watched a TED talk, and it's very true, and I feel that a lot of people in the non-disabled community really idolize, good success stories, and, for themselves to like a feel good moment, and that's not okay. But no, I've definitely have learned a lot from different disabled people, and I'm always learning, and I feel like there's always going to be ableist views. Even disabled people have ableism views, and it's so important that we are constantly learning from other people, especially with just different disabilities, to help grow and expand our own viewpoints.
You mentioned a TED Talk a second ago. Was it Stella Young's TED Talk?
Yes, it was Stella's Young. Yep.
Had a feeling. So, what are some of the biggest flaws or challenges in the medical system for people who are deaf or blind? And what are some examples that can or should be changed?
Yeah. The very first thing I thought of is Medicare. Medicare and the fact that they do not cover hearing aids is astounding to me. The answers, obviously, if you have to be 65 and older to be on Medicare, and the hearing loss impacts the older population. As we know, it impacts everyone, but especially the older population, and it's the fact that's something that we need to change. And just also private insurances needs to do better job with hearing aid coverage. And lastly, there's plenty of laws, but the fact that people who are receiving disability, I am blanking right now, but basically gain income from disability payments. Wow, I'm really blanking.
I think you need Medicaid.
No, I'm
Is that
talking like, so when SSI, or when they are relying on those, they cannot get married. And that is problematic because if they get married, they lose those benefits. And that is something that needs to be addressed as well.
you mentioned they don't cover hearing aids. How much do hearing aids usually cost?
Um, it varies, but it can be starting at least 1,500 for one, up to 7, 8 thousand dollars for a pair. And so it's not cheap at all. And everybody deserves to have a right to hearing devices if that's something they want.
I feel like it shouldn't cost and a lot more than like an AirPod, maybe.
Yeah, like these hearing aids are, so there's a difference between hearing aids and amplifiers, and the amplifiers are going to be around AirPod costs, which is it's understandable because basically it's just a little microphone that amplifies everything. But
Yes.
when it comes to hearing aids, it amplifies where you need the amplification. So let's say you have normal hearing in certain areas, and then you have a hearing loss in the higher frequencies, it's not going to touch the areas that has normal hearing. So hearing aids are a little bit more complex. And so I understand the pricing. However, I believe that everybody needs to have access to hearing aids, and it should be free based on their insurance. And if they don't, obviously, I think there needs to be some sort of assistance out there to help people to be able to afford these things, because being able to hear is a right if that's what the person wants to, what they need and they want to be able to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what kind of accessibility needs do people on the blind spectrum need that isn't like readily available?
Hmm, that's a really great question. Um, that I'm not one, but you said blind people or deaf blind people? I'm sorry.
Just blind. Uh, yeah, just blind.
Okay. So I guess access to education, with the resources that they need to be successful in their daily, living. Um, Honestly, when I was diagnosed as blind, my doctor recommended me to the Division of Blind Services. If he hadn't done that, I honestly wouldn't have known where to start. So I have a white cane. Like, if I didn't get referred to the Division of Blind Services, I would not honestly have known how to get a white cane. I would definitely had to ask around. Um, you know, service dogs, I just would be Googling it. But honestly, I'm not 100% sure. I am still new to the blind community. So I'm not speaking for all. So to be honest, I'm sure there are more barriers that I just don't know about yet.
Is there anything uh specific to people who are both blind and deaf that like is anything they need that they can't quite get?
I'm not honestly sure. I just know that Helen Keller is a great resource to utilize. And they work with deafblind people, and that's what they specialize. So I know they would be a great resource, and they would be able to help deafblind people to get those accommodations that are needed.
Well, back in college, I took an elective class about the deaf community, and there was an assignment that talked about what you mentioned earlier, cochlear implants.
Mhm.
Some deaf advocates that we learned from through videos and articles said that parents should wait till their child is older for them to decide if they want those implants. Yet you got yours when you were just two. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that. Do you wish
Absolutely.
you had waited?
No, I don't wish I waited. I'm grateful that my parents did not wait. Um, there's research shown if you wait, your success with cochlear implants does dwindle. I'm not saying you wouldn't be successful, it'd just be more of a challenge. And I've definitely experienced that myself personally. I actually have two cochlear implants and I just wear one. And I got my cochlear implant at 2 on my right ear and at 11 on my left ear. And I was naive and I thought I would be able to hear right away. And it takes a lot of time and training to be able to hear. And to this day, I still don't wear my cochlear on my left side because of the challenges that I ran into. However, I am very for parents making that decision. If they want their child to wait, then that's their decision. My parents made the decision for both my brother and I, And if my parents had the opportunity to make that decision, why don't other parents deserve that same decision that they can make for their children or child? So I always encourage parents, as an audiologist, I'm here as a resource and to educate. And then as parents, you take that information and you make that decision based on what you feel is best for you, your family, and your child. So yeah, so I'm very much, it's the parent's choice. But there are research showing different things. So you just have to really truly understand what decision you are making, and it can have a long-term effects if your child does eventually wants to get a cochlear implant or not.
Yeah, I think it was more about the bodily autonomy of the disabled person, you know? Uh, so you mentioned Usher syndrome. Could you explain why it's important to advocate for those who have that specifically?
Um, so Usher syndrome, it affects 440,000 people worldwide. And it's projected that more people have Usher syndrome than those actual numbers. However, it's the lack of understanding and education of what Usher syndrome is, and also just in the lower social economical statuses, people are not getting that those diagnoses. So I believe it's important to advocate for people with Usher syndrome. It's just to spread awareness. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote my children's book, is so that way people can see what Usher syndrome is. That you can see the title and be like, what is that? So that way, the more research is, or more awareness, the more research, and maybe there could be a cure out there one day, for people who actually want a cure. Not all people may want a cure, but I do know some. So it's just important to spread awareness what Usher syndrome is for that purpose. Also, just have a better understanding that there are people who are deafblind that exist and are living their lives to the fullest.
You mentioned whether like some people might want to cure, some people don't.
Hmm.
If one was available, do you think you would want one?
Um, when it comes to my vision, yes. Um, I I would want to stop it. Um, my hearing loss, absolutely not. I love being deaf. I love being able to take off my cochlear. And whenever people ask me that, my very first thought is, I don't know how to be able to sleep as a hearing person. Like, I feel like rubbing against the pillows would irritate me. Be like, yeah, I can't do it. I just love like the peace and quiet when I take off my cochlear, and just like that is ultimate peace and quiet, and I absolutely love it.
Hmm. So you said before that blindness is a spectrum.
Mhm.
How do you teach people that blindness isn't a monolith? Not everyone is fully blind.
Yeah. Um, like an example, I shared earlier how I just like I'm looking straight ahead and I can't even see my hands. And I think just explain it to people, it gives them a better understanding. I always, whenever I give talks, I always give an example. Like, so if you're looking straight ahead and look without turning your head, I want you to find something that's on your right, left, up, or down of you. And then I want you to form circles of your eyes and put them against your eyes. And basically, if you can't, and without turning your head, I want you to be able to look what's on your right, left, up, or down of you. And a lot of times people don't see what is on the right, left, up, or down. And that is what my vision is. It's narrow, it's just slowly shrinking, and people slowly have a better understanding. But basically, I I always share that, it's not complete darkness. And, people may have central vision loss, meaning they can't see in front, but they can see on their peripheral. Like, I just try to break it down and just be like, blindness is not completely dark. It's different things.
So you talked about your children's book. Let's talk about that. I actually just published an alphabet book about disabilities back in September. Uh, what's your book about?
So my book is about a little girl who has a cochlear implant and a hearing aid. And she faces adversity and she learns how to overcome it with her confidence. And it is the very first book of the Usher syndrome series. So my first book is going to talk is it is co it covered hearing. My next book is covering vision loss. And the third book is going to be balance. And then after that is going to cover Usher syndrome as a whole.
Sounds very interesting. Do you think writing these books has influenced your own experience with being disabled?
Oh, absolutely. I wrote this children's book for multiple different reasons. One is representation. Growing up, I've never seen a disabled Black person as the main character. And that was something that was very important to me to put that in a story, to have little girls who look like me to see themselves in the book. And when I have gone to different events, I've seen little girls just looking, pointing at their cochlear or pointing at their hair and be like, oh, like she has the same hair or ears as me. And that has been one of the most rewarding things, is just seeing other kids look like me, being able to relate to a story. Um, and, this book actually displays some of my own personal experiences. And it was actually very therapeutic to put it down on paper. And also, hearing other people that actually happened to me too. It is important to show that, people that they're not alone. So how do you hope it help new generation of readers and young or children and young readers? Um, Honestly, I really hope that they gain the confidence of accepting their disability and who they are as a person. Um, Growing up with a disability can be a challenge, and especially if you are one of the only or one of the few in your school cohort, in your community. Um, that can be a challenge. That can be exhausting to have to explain, your disabilities, explain what you need when you just want to just fit in. Um, but I hope these kids find the confidence to be okay with who they are and confidently share what they need so that way they can enjoy where they are. What topics do I talk about in my speaking engagements? I share a little bit about my background, my story. I also talk about accessibility, intersectionality. I talk about that a lot. The importance of understanding what intersectionality is, because I don't feel many people understand what intersectionality is. Basically, just I didn't realize I was intersectional until maybe about a couple years ago. It just really opened my eyes. I am a Black woman who happens to be disabled and queer. And so I have a lot of different layers when it comes to, my life journey. And, some days I face a barrier in one section, and then another day there may be a barrier that I have to face another. I was just telling someone, when I went to Walmart and I had my white cane and I wasn't sure if I was being stared at because of my skin tone, my white cane, or the fact that I was queer. Uh, it's those are the thoughts I think about frequently, and that's something I talk about in my talks is, intersectionality, and also just understanding ways to be an advocate. Advocacy is so important to me, just teaching your kids, teaching your patients, just teaching people in general how to be advocates for your patients or even for yourself. Those are extremely important to me. And I talk about other topics if requested, but those are my main things.
Hold on a second. So I'm having
You okay?
trouble with the audio still going in and out.
No.
Okay, in that case, have you had any pushbacks or disagreements from the audience during your speeches? And if so, how do you handle that?
Um, Actually, I've not. I have not had any pushbacks or disagreements during my talks. However, I am relatively new. I started, speaking engagements about a year ago. And so I'm sure I'll run into those challenges, but I have not had any negative experiences yet, thankfully. And if I were to, honestly, I would come to it with an open mind, and hear that person out and have a better understanding why they disagree, because obviously every person is going to have a different viewpoint. They may agree, they may disagree, or they may somewhat agree. And I'm always open to learning and opening my own viewpoint and have a better understanding on the disagreement.
What do you think has been the overall response to your talks?
It's been very positive. Is I share my experiences as, I'm not, when I speak, I don't want to share anything that's going to be negative. Because like I said, everybody has their own opinion, and it's more so this is based on my own experiences, and I share like oh, that's a good question. I apologize. Um Yeah, I really tried my best to be transparent on my own experiences, and also if there's anything negative, I try to be mindful and tread lightly.
Well, we've covered a lot of different topics here. Uh, pause. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss that we haven't talked about, or any questions for me?
What is your viewpoint on disability?
This is me as speaker, and him talking, but you mentioned earlier seeing like more Black disabled people. I recommend the show Superstore. There is black paraplegic man on that show. It, one of the funniest characters. I would definitely recommend one. Okay, here. Okay, finish typing. Uh, my viewpoints are mostly positive. I love being disabled, and our community is amazing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. Ever since, I never viewed myself as disabled until my legally blind diagnosis. And I always viewed disability as a negative word. And when I became legally blind, I fully embraced that term. And I don't view it as a negative association. I'm just like, yeah, I'm a disabled person. And as a healthcare provider, I have to be mindful of that word. Because I mentioned a patient and I were having a conversation, and she was asking about like accommodations in school, and I was like, yeah, if you just go to Office of Disability or something along those lines, each university may call it something different. And we were, I kept going, and the patient just looked at me, and so I stopped, and she was like, am I considered as disabled? And it just really opened my perspective, because I'm like, I use that word. I'm like, it's fine. Like, yeah, I'm disabled, but other people may not be ready to even associate with that word, um, or even view themselves as that, because our society make that word sound so dirty, and have a negative connotation to it. um and I think that's something needs to change, and people need to fully embrace that word.
yeah, some people prefer that word. Some people use the term handicapped, I've heard before.
Hmm.
Differently abled is another one. And, there's a couple others. Yeah, so it depends on each person whether they prefer disabled, handicapped, and although I'm pretty sure no one likes the C word for it.
Yeah.
That one's pretty clear cut. Uh, so, any other questions for
uh
us?
what inspired you to write your children's book?
How kids would get curious and have questions, and I loved them. But I noticed that adults would sometimes not know how to explain things in simplified ways. So I figured an alphabet book could help out with that. But anyways, uh, thanks so much for coming on and having this conversation with me. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I did. I've appreciated the insights that you've provided. If people want to connect with you and support what you do, where and how can they do that?
Uh, well, thank you so much, Sean, for having me. I really enjoyed this. If you want to connect with me, my Instagram is the best way. It's Dr. Jasmine Simmons, and it's JASMINE SIMMONS. Or you can also reach out to me via my website, same as drjasminesimmons.com.
Thanks. We will make sure to put all that in the description below. Once again, I'm Sean Gold. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like, comment on your thoughts, and subscribe. Also, make sure the bell is on so that you can be notified for each upload. I'll see you next time on another episode of Crippled by Culture.
Bye.
Want to listen to Crippled by Culture on your favorite podcast platform? Well, now you can. Crippled by Culture is now available wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search up the show title and make sure you subscribe. Thank you for being a listener.